going on as well. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another in what has been a remarkable series of online international conferences that we've been conducting as part of the work of the Boston Global Forum over the course of the past 3 weeks. It's a beautiful morning, a beautiful September, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and welcome not only very good people that are here, but to many of you all over the globe who will be participating in this conference with us. Boston Global Forum was really the brainchild of Tuan Nguyen, who is responsible for this institution, for these sessions, for some of the work that we've been doing. And there are a few of us who began collaborating with him some 3 years ago, and very privileged to be a part of this. What's the purpose of Boston Global Forum? To focus on particular issues, one per year, which we believe are of enormous international importance and significance, to see if we can bring together people from all over the globe to discuss these issues and to begin to come up with recommendations for dealing with them. We began with international occupational safety and health as a result of the Bangladesh disasters, and I think contributed significantly to the fact that those problems have now focused on part of the community. This past year, we turned to the issue of peace and security in the Pacific and how to create a framework for peace and security in the Pacific. And I'd like to think we've at least begun a serious international discussion about that in a very important way. And as we know today, even as we speak, the President of China and the President of the United States are meeting and discussing some of those issues. So this year, we've decided to turn to the issue of cyber security, of cyber warfare, of cyber interference, recognizing this remarkable information system that's been created can do great things, but also create lots of problems. And we hope that beginning today and over the course of this year, we'll not only be able to bring some very, very good people together around these discussions, but begin to get governments themselves seriously talking to us. There seems to be some evidence that China and the United States are beginning to do that. But apparently focused primarily on cyber warfare. We want to take this discussion up several levels. Because if you're going to have an international information system, as we do now, that provides great benefits, it can't be one where people assume that their communication is being intercepted all the time. And I think, regrettably, that's the kind of world that we currently find ourselves in. So the obvious question is, what should the international community, what should good people and the international community do to see if we can stop that kind of stuff and create an international information network and systems in which people have the assurance of knowing that their communications are going to be theirs and the people to whom they are being directed. And we believe that this is a very, very important issue that faces this entire world of ours, and it's time for governments and interested people everywhere to get serious about doing something about it. We're going to begin with some opening remarks by four very good people. Ryan Vaness, who happens to be my colleague of the Political Science Department of Northeastern University, has done some very good work in this field. Ted Gordon, who's been one of the world's great futurists, co-founder and director of the Millennium Project, who is here with us with his wife, Jocelyn Kerr, a research fellow in the Cyber Project at the Kennedy School and the Belfer Center. Jocelyn. And then Ambassador Jiro Fujisaki, who's the president of the American Japan Society and professor at Sophia University in Tokyo. Once they provide some brief comments to us, then we're going to turn to some other very good people and invite them in both here and from other places around the world. And as always, I think we're going to have a good, lively discussion. And I hope and expect that this is going to be a takeoff point for a lot of very serious work that will be done internationally in this field. So Ryan, let's begin with you. And I want to ask our speakers to come up here to the microphone and speak from here so that we can get you. Ryan.
Let me try this. Okay.
Where can I see it on the Is that, can we make that bigger? All right, thank you, Governor. So I forgot the technological goes out of the way. My name is Ryan Manus. I'm a visiting fellow of Security and Resilience Policy at Northeastern University. I'm here to talk about, are we entering an era of cyber peace? Question mark. Are we or are we not? And then a shameless plug of my book with Oxford University Press if you're interested in reading about my empirical work on cyber turn of the century. So let's start. So basically the year 2015, as we see with the media and with government officials, it's like a real breakout year for high-profile damaging cyber actions like the Sony hack, the OPM attacks, the IRS, and even Ashley Madison. But basically, this idea is that cyber conflict is prevalent and normal, according to the data that we collect, kind of flies against all evidence from a macro perspective. When you look at all of the cyber incidents in the international system and collect them from a macro point of view, that these overt cyber incidents are somewhat rare, and we're seeing maybe more low-level cyber incidents for the most part. So on the contrary, we're finding that there's a developing cyber norm against the use of severe cyber tactics, I'm talking cyber weaponry, like cyber espionage and things like that. We'll get to that soon. So perception is really not reality, and we're entering a relative stable era of cyber peace. And then let me clarify what I mean by cyber peace. So borrowing from John Galton, who kind of delineated what negative and positive peace is, negative peace basically refers to the absence of violence. That's what we're seeing in the cyber domain right now. We're not seeing cyber escalate into the military domain, where if somebody with a cyber attack is being responded to with a military response. We're seeing relatively isolated incidents of cyber incidents where retaliation has really not become a part of our normal relations between states. So positive peace is built with positive content such as restoration of relationships, the creation of social systems that serve the needs of the whole population, and the constructive resolution of conflict. This is what we need to move towards in the cyber domain. I think that's what the goal of this conference is to move to a more positive. So right now, cyber conflict is in an era of negative peace, and states should strive towards positive peace. Okay? So we like to self-identify ourselves in academia. So right now, in the cybersecurity field, at least in political science and the social sciences, we've been labeled as either cyber prognosticators or cyber skeptics. The prognosticators, those that think that cyber is going to be a revolution in military affairs, it's going to change the whole way we think about international interactions, versus the cyber skeptics, those that take a more skeptical view. I like to put myself in the middle of the road, so when I say we, I'm talking about my co-author, Brandon Valeriano of the University of Glasgow. We assert that there could be a middle point of view, what could be framed as cyber moderation, and that's what we like to identify ourselves. And here's a quote from the book where we say, cyber conflict will occur but the conflicts themselves will be trivial, will not result in a change in behavior of the target, and will largely be regional cyber incidents connected to traditional international issues at stake between states. And actually, that's what we find for the most part in the empirical world, that a lot of these cyber disputes between countries are over overseas that states are usually involved in. Most states are rivals. Most states that are rivals are neighbors, and most states that have disputes are territorial disputes. So a lot of this cyber is propagandist reactions to the normal disputes that you see usually. But we're not saying we're very skeptical of cyber technology, that it's not going to be something that we need to worry about. We're just worried about the research. We're skeptical of hyperbolic. We're just skeptical of research that have hyperbolic announcements that there is a cyber revolution and cyber power will change the international interactions. So we're kind of taking this middle ground. Cyber is a problem, yes. Is cyber a problem so much that we need to worry about it to the point where we think we're going to go to war over it? So let me show you what I mean via the evidence that I collected. So basically, I come from the international relations School of Thought and Political Science. One of my mentors is John Vasquez at the University of Illinois. So why does any of this matter? Basically, the cyber prognosticators tries to marginalize and paint their most important challengers as simply out of touch and unreasonable. That people like me who kind of are somewhat skeptical about cyber weaponry being the next big thing when it comes to international conflict aren't really being reasonable about the future of international interactions. So I posit three hypotheses. Hypothesis one would be, while we are witnessing a rise in cyber conflict, there's no precipitous increase in the severity of cyber incidents. And I use this with my data set. I've collected all cyber incidents between states from 2001 to 2011. I have updated it till 2014. It's being reviewed right now by my peers, so that will be released soon. But right now, I only have cyber incidents for 2011. Hypothesis two is actors are restrained from responding to cyber incidents. Basically, when somebody is hit by a cyber attack or a cyber incident, the retaliatory response is little to nothing. And then hypothesis three, which I think is going to be an issue that we need to discuss today, definitely, because that's what Z and Obama, I'm sure, are discussing today. A great proportion of cyber actions are falling in the domain of espionage in the form of stealing. As we all know, China's hacking into our systems a lot and stealing a lot of our intellectual property, and that's something that we definitely need to address. So like my mentor Vasquez, we believe that political and international relations theory should be able to explain the past, the present, and the future. So what evidence do I have of cyber peace? Well, the fact is there have been no major attacks between countries that have risen to any serious level of danger where the chances of armed conflict break out. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule. The closest we've had is when Russia used the option against Georgia, which Russia did have a cyber operation along with its military campaign in the 5-day conflict with Georgia. But as far as how tied that was to military operations and their military tactics that Russia launched on Georgia and South Ossetia is really shaky ground. Also with Estonia, when the Bronze Soldier dispute happened, when Estonia moved a grave marker to outside the center square of Tallinn, it was responded to in kind with a barrage of cyber attacks that shut down a lot of government and private networks where Estonians really couldn't conduct their daily lives because Estonians are really plugged in the country. And then when Iran used it against Saudi Arabia in 2012, it's known as the Shamoon attack, where wiper malware pretty much wiped out all the data on Saudi Arabia's Aramco oil company, which caused about a week or two's worth of disruption, but oil production was able to continue. And then probably the most overt one was when the United States used the Stuxnet virus against Iran, roughly from 2007 to 2011. So these examples outweigh the volumes of other observations. Like I said, I take a macro view. I collect all cyber incidents between states, failing to effectively use cyber or states utilizing methods to probe potential vulnerabilities, but going no further. So what we are seeing in the international system is a whole lot of rain in the form of cyber attacks, but no wind, no sleet in the form of cyber destruction or violence. We have a negative piece. So we're seeing a lot of disruption, deception, and evidence. Disruption being the denial of service, DDoS attacks that we see all the time happening to a lot of countries when it comes to their networks being shut down. Deception, a lot of website defacements, a lot of propaganda launched against each other. And then I think what's the most important thing we need to look at is the cyber espionage and how that's kind of run wild so far. So based on my data set, this is what we've seen since basically the turn of the century. We see that cyber incidents, and for the most part, are on the rise. We see more and more and more of them every year. But as far as how severe they are, and we can talk severity scale after the talk, if you probably speed this up. Basically, we're seeing rise in cyber attacks, but no rise in severity. And as we can see, the most attacks are either espionage, disruptions, or deceptions. So we posit a theory of cyber restraint as opposed to cyber deterrence. So restraints the strategic underpinning of how many states confront cyber actions. So David Sanger, who writes on cyber all the time in the New York Times, basically is saying, and this is true with the OPM attack, in a series of classified meetings among options that range from largely symbolic responses like sanctions to more significant actions in some of which could lead to an escalation of the hacking conflict between the two countries, talking about what should the United States do to China about the OPM hack. We don't really know, and as we all know, Obama's still kind of pondering what to do. So maybe there's going to be some constructive talks coming out of what happens today. I know he's talking to him pretty much all day today. So even some of the most cantankerous states in the system tend to behave in a responsible manner for the most part. So why is there restraint in cyberspace? Well, the overt cyber weapons that people launch against each other, like Stuxnet, can be reproduced. Once you launch a cyber attack against another country, they can study it, they can study the forensics, and they can either shore up their defenses against this type of weapon, or they can replicate it and throw it back at you. So we've seen this with, as a response to Stuxnet, and what's called Operation Cleaver coming out of Iran. We've never seen any kind of this technology coming out of Iran. They've been hitting Saudi Arabia, they've been hitting Israel, and they've been hitting the United States. A lot of this has come after the revelation of the Stuxnet work, meaning that they got the technology. We gave them this technology. Also, these cyber weapons like Stuxnet are not simple to design. Stuxnet took years to develop and took millions of dollars and a lot of resources. We're talking about these overt cyber weapons. It takes a lot of resources to design these types of things. Also, there's the chances of collateral damage. Cyber is not really containable. Cyber can spread into other networks. It can affect a lot of civilians, and therefore, when there are civilians affected, that demands an escalatory response. So that's another reason why we might see restraint in cyberspace. Also, the high potential for diffusion of the conflict, because, like I said, viruses can spread into other networks. Even Stuxnet was launched into an air-gapped network, but it still got out into other countries. So not everything can be contained. And then finally, blowback, since cyber weapons used to great effect, like Stuxnet, will demand repercussions. And we've seen responses from Iran since Stuxnet. Iran has been launching cyber incidents against the United States and its allies as a response to this. So restraint in action, what I'm talking about here is state-to-state cyber incidents and then how states have responded. So 87 or 78% of the data collected, we see no response when states are victims of cyber attacks. 17, you see a cyber response in kind. Only 7, you see maybe a militarized response, a militarized interstate response. Not a military attack, some sort of escalated rhetoric or maybe even movement of military forces. That's only 6% of the time. And then when cyber and military responses happen at the same time, there's only been 2, so 1.8 out of the 111 cyber incidents collected. So what we're seeing now is the rise of cyber espionage. And with the new data set that I've collected, the data set that I collected up in 2014, there's now 165 cyber incidents, and a lot of this is espionage. It's about the same level of disruptions and deceptions, about the same level, actually a reduced level of weaponry, but a big rise in cyber espionage campaigns, a lot of it coming from China, obviously. So the constant hacking seems to be reported every day are an intense demonstration of this and provide a stark reminder of the reality of how cyber technologies are used for effect by states and individuals alike. So cyber espionage, basically trying to define it, can be understood as the use of digital means to obtain secretive information from governments and other non-government entities such as corporations. So a big chunk of the 111 cyber incidents that I collected up to 2011 are cyber espionage. So let's think about norms of cyber peace right now. So the big issue right now is China steals all our stuff. So China's stealing all our stuff. Why is this happening, and what do you do to prevent it? Well, obviously we need to talk to China, and we need to come up with some sort of solution. But what we have to remember is there's a lot we can do defensively to prevent this in the first place. We do not have good policies in place. Did you know that the OPM still runs on Windows XP, and that the IRS still runs on Windows 98? And therefore, kind of putting this into perspective, if you're going to go out for the night and you leave your lights on, your door open, and you put a sign up saying "steal my stuff," people are going to steal your stuff. So I'm not saying that China's all to blame for this. We have to shore up our defenses. We're pretty technologically advanced. I think we can do these sorts of things. And then when we do that, we can talk norms in cyberspace. So when norms or expected modes of behavior are present and adhered to, these international actors are restrained from acting outside these normative structures. So cyber conflict is a particular situation of which existing international norms can, and based on our empirical evidence, are being applied by states. Some exceptions to being Stuxnet. I think the United States actually is regretting launching Stuxnet against Iran because of what Iran's been doing in kind. And also there's a lot of confidence in the digital domain. We're putting all of our stuff online. We're banking online. We're shopping online. So there's some sort of trust within the digital domain that we shouldn't fear so much, but we need to be better at being more resilient at protecting ourselves. We can't expect that we can protect ourselves from 100% of all cyber attacks coming our way, but we need to be resilient enough where we can prevent as many as we can. Okay? So many might scoff at the idea of norms. In their basic sense, they can be effective means to control the basic behaviors of the majority of actors. There's always going to be deviance, but as long as we have clear systems of norms, deviancy will be seen as just that, out of that norm. So, in my opinion, what's the cyber future? I'll leave more of the future to the futurists. But militarizing digital, little room for civilian applications such as research, communication, education, and productivity. The internet's a great thing. We need it to be for this. Militarizing it will be stifling that. Given that we are in an era of stability and peace, how do we encourage it to endure? The simplest way is to maintain the attacks by states and non-state actors alike on civilian populations are off limits. They should be taboo. Also, institutions need to be built that might enforce these norms of non-action and cyber protection. And then finally, cyber states can be controlled and made safe. There are ways to do it. We need to get the people that know how to defend it in touch with the policymakers. Maybe that's what we can do. So to be aware of the possible escalation dynamics in each conflict, and to take in all the information as possible, not just relying on one source of perspective. So I do think there's hope in the cyber future. I do think that there's a developing norm happening, that states are learning that you can't be more overt. But I think I'm way over time, so I'll stop at that and let the next speaker talk. So sorry.
Governor. It's a pleasure to address you all this morning here in Cambridge as well as around the world. I am the futurist that Ryan referred to, or at least one of them. And most of my remarks come from a study. If I pace, can you still hear me? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Most of my remarks come from a study that we did at the Millennium Project, in which we asked experts around the world to give us their judgments about future developments that could come from lone wolf terrorists. And among the input that we got from them, we spent a lot of time picking people whose judgments we would honor and give credibility to. And this group told us the lone wolf situation gets worse before it gets better. These are single individuals that are bent on doing damage in some way, or in pursuing their goals in some way that benefits themselves or groups they belong to. The lone wolf phenomenon is one of the cases where history does not give us a complete or even an appropriate picture of things do get worse before they get better, because the amount of power that these people control grows over time. We asked the questions about who these people were, how they became radicalized, and what perspectives they might have for the future. So, Ryan, while I agree with you that an interesting and important beginning is to look at history, a much different picture emerges when you turn it around and say, what can happen in the future that was not seen in history? And here, it would get a different picture of what can evolve, because the power of the tools, the objectives, the mergers, the overlapping interests of the actors changes over time. And there is no database to go to find out what that picture is. This comes from the minds of people, which is in fact the way the study I mentioned was structured. So the view we formed of cyberspace from this work is that cyberspace is a space that has three dimensions, as in fact all space is three or more. And the dimensions of cyberspace are the actors, from lone wolves that I mentioned a moment ago, through nation states, including organized crime, including terrorist organizations, intelligence organizations, maybe rogue states as well. And the second dimension is the objectives of the people who constitute these actors. What are they after? Well, at the hacker end, they're after self-aggrandizement, identification of their power to cause chaos. And at the other end, the objective is to influence the course of nations. And the third dimension is the weaponry which is used by these actors, ranging from viruses and worms through espionage, sabotage, and detection of malintent. Yes, the study included even that. How can we use the internet to identify people who might want to do harm to us? I'll have more to say about that in a minute. And the interesting thing is that there are synergies between these groups that look disparate at first and yet come together in terms of their objectives. For example, blackmail and money laundering. One objective of distorting the internet in order to achieve that end. That's an objective shared by organized crime and terrorist organizations. They coincide here. And we find many of that kind of overlap. So that our conclusion was that there is a creep toward violence in the internet, in cyberspace. In fact, if you look at the number of websites that are devoted to terrorist activities, in 2003 there were approximately 2,600. In 2009, 15,000. And if one had to guess about 2015, the number is probably 25,000. In a conversation before this meeting with the governor, I asked, why isn't that we can use the prowess of the United States advertising and marketing capability to influence those sites? Where is there a site that says, if you join those guys, you're a jerk. You are following some approach that is rejectable, that is despicable. Why can't we put that across? We've used advertising in some way. If you see it, say something. If it doesn't look right, report it. And that's got the same kind of dimension as smoking is bad for you. But that's only beginning. It's possible for us to influence through the techniques that we find ourselves expert at. This creep toward violence that I mentioned is evidenced in a number of different ways. There's about 3.5 million PCs, personal computers, that are now influenced by virus infections of one sort or another. We guess there were 100 million records stolen last year. from government and corporations. And some of these have already been mentioned, Sony being persuaded through cyberspace to delay or not introduce their movie called The Interview, and cyber attacks on large banks. There's a continuing call for violence from Al-Qaeda, for example, to influence individuals to join the ranks of the lone wolf. Just last week, al-Zawahiri called on Muslim men, most lone wolves are men, to follow the examples of the Boston bombers, and this call to action was carried in on most sites. Use your programming talent to attack, and he meant attack in the interest of the extremists. Lone wolf attacks from our study were seen by this group to have the potential to escalate beyond the Twin Towers in terms of killing potential and injury. We asked the question in this study, for example, what do you think a single lone wolf attack will kill 10,000 people? And while there was disagreement, the answer was within several decades, 2050. Where? North America. Why? Religion. Who's the target population? What are the weapons? Biotech and information. With a lot of undecided answers, and a lot of areas where there was no clear-cut consensus. And that, in fact, is different than most studies of this sort that we run, where consensus can be achieved. Here, there was no consensus. Should scientific papers that contain information that can be used by lone wolves or terrorists in general be published openly, as science calls for? Half said yes, half said no. Will soft approaches work? Are we willing to compromise privacy in order to improve safety, security, and how much compromises are warranted? As we looked at the panoply of future technologies and asked about their potential for damage in cyberspace, the list is long. Robots, synthetic biology, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, what a soft target that is on the Internet. The rise of massive databases. I'll finish in a couple of minutes. Hacking into automated systems like self-driving automobiles, like the control system of an aircraft. Blackmail through honeypots. The list was very long. But there were upbeat developments as well that were forecasted. Detection of malintent, as I mentioned a moment ago, through the analysis and synthesis of databases that contained information about individuals. The psychological theory is that lone wolves and terrorists in general have a certain profile which is recognizable. All of the information in this profile is contained in databases somewhere, most likely, or if not yet will be, so that there's a chance for an algorithm that can combine the information from these databases and assess the threat level of an individual. Assess malintent ahead of time. This is like the Minority Report short story, and the movie's called Minority Report. Find the crime before it occurs. Interdict yourself. Now we find that of half of the crimes that are reported, half have occurred. I mean, half there has been damage, but for the other half, they have been interdicted successfully by standard police methods, including profiling, including entrapment, what some people would call entrapment, at least creating synthetic false friends that ostensibly are going to help obtain weaponry. So in the end, we're left with questions that the ethics that we're seeking at this meeting has to address. Should we publish everything that may or may not be in our interest? How far should we go in this trade-off between liberties and threat reduction? As the possibility of large-scale destruction becomes evident, as we think it may well, 100,000 people eventually in a single episode, then the willingness to trade off grows. What about the stigma of false positives? Suppose this synthesis of databases that I talked about leads to the identification of people who are risky or perceived as risky. Do we label them as potential terrorists, and what do we do about that? And if we're wrong, think about how we have affected those people. So in the end, we do need a code of net ethics to which individuals and nations can ascribe. Who will write it? Who will sign it? What's on it? Don't lie, Governor. Consider positions were swapped. Would we want that to happen to us? And does it improve things? All questions for that ethics statement yet to be written. Thank you. Thanks, Jim.
Enforcement. Sim. Que colaboradores da doutrina tem estado.
In the left corner. This way. Hi there. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Jackie Kerr. I'm a fellow at the Kennedy School Belfer Center's Cyber Project this year. We've talked a little bit about a couple of threats to the future of the global internet already. We've talked about cybersecurity and cyber warfare, and we've talked about cyber crime and cyber terrorism. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about another threat, which is as states exert greater and greater control over the internet within their territory, what that potential threat that has for the development and future of the global internet, and potential for fragmentation. We see here an image from a major protest movement in Russia in 2011-2012, which was known to highly leverage the internet and information technologies. Largest protest movement that had occurred in Russia since the collapse of the Soviet Union. At the time, the internet in Russia was still highly unrestricted relative to the overall regime type, and which made it a very interesting case of asymmetry in terms of the online versus offline regime type. There was a period for a long time in the 90s and 2000s where so-called web idealists thought of the internet as a liberation technology which would continuously strengthen the hand of society vis-a-vis nation states, and which was generally unregulatable by states. However, in the early days of the internet, people like John Gilmer from the EFF would describe the internet as routing around censorship, as being fundamentally unregulatable. But we've seen a sea change in this in recent years. Researchers from University of Toronto's Citizen Lab now describe it as where it was once considered impossible for governments to control cyberspace, there are now a wide variety of technical and non-technical means at their disposal to shape and limit the online flow of information. The technology is changing and evolving, and states are becoming more aware of how they can, in one way or another, restrict or dampen the uses by society of the internet within their territory. And so I'll talk with you a little bit about the global trends we see in the wide variety of different methods that states are using to try to control the use of the internet within their societies. I'll give you one very interesting dynamic example, the Russian case in the last few years where policies have been changing dramatically, and a little bit about what the future prospects are and how this discussion of norms and ethics might play into that. When we think of internet regulation in non-democratic settings in particular, we often think of things like this. This is from Qatar. I saw this guy a few times when I was living there a couple of years ago. It's at least humorous, but a block page telling you this information is banned for one reason or another. But internet restrictions have moved well beyond just this kind of blunt blocking. There's now a wide variety of different approaches, sometimes referred to as generations, with the first generation being the blunter instruments, the things that are more obvious, like site blocking we just saw, like keyword filtering, manual content censorship of particular types of content. These are all things, for example, we see in the Chinese so-called Great Firewall, complete network shutdowns like you saw in Egypt during the Arab Spring. On the other hand, there are things which are subtler, more plausibly deniable, more legalistic, which have been adopted in recent years, sometimes layered on top of these blunter types of techniques, and sometimes in the absence of those. Russia was for a long time seen as a pioneer in some of these second-generation approaches, even though the internet was generally uncensored. Approaches like legal measures, like takedown requests behind the scenes to service providers or to hosting providers to particular sites, DDoS attacks on election day on some particular resource, use of patriotic trolling or patriotic hacking groups that have some link that's sort of plausibly deniable to the government. So there are a lot of different approaches being taken. There's also a wide variety across states that are of otherwise similar regime type, a wide variety of different levels of restriction. This is data from 2011 from the Open Net Initiative project at Citizen Lab, looking at internet censorship levels versus offline civil liberties restrictions, or overall regime type in terms of civil liberties restrictions. And what you see is, instead of being a perfect correlation, a lot of data falls in this lower right corner, where you have states which have lots of restrictions on civil society, on the media, on freedom of expression overall or offline, but they don't have much by way of internet censorship. So this is sometimes referred to as policy asymmetry, a lack of policy linkage between the online and offline space. Russia, for example, falls into that category. You see down there. And a lot of states of the former Soviet region, actually. You also see some regional dynamics. The color coding is by region. You see some clusters, like up in the right-hand corner, the black is the states of the Gulf Commonwealth, the GCC, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, which were more exemplars in the other direction of having high censorship. Another interesting pattern you see is that as penetration increases, while you might expect one sort of monotonic increase in restriction as the internet plays a more important role in society, becomes more politicized, and in fact you probably do see more regulation even in democracies. In terms of censorship data, what you see is that most authoritarian states seem to follow a trend towards greater censorship as internet penetration rates increase, whereas the most democratic states seem to coalesce around a less high censorship model. But then, so this is coded from Freedom House's Freedom in the World, partly free, not free, and most free states. It's a not ideal heuristic, but if you look at the states that are in black, that are partly free, these are states which some political scientists would refer to as electoral authoritarian states, hybrid regimes, and they face some real conflicting pressures. At this point, they're all over the place. They haven't followed either of these trends yet, and it's unclear which they will. Internet penetration in these states also tends to be still, at that point in time, relatively low. Makes it interesting to look at a case like Russia, which certainly has, through the 2000s, been this kind of state that has characteristics of both a democracy and of an authoritarian state. So looking at the Russian case, you see an example where there's been a policy sea change in recent years, where the internet was largely uncensored. It was seen as something of a free-for-all, in spite of a crackdown on media, on civil society throughout the 2000s. And since this protest movement, which really drew attention to the risks the regime faced, you have a real dramatic change with crackdown on the internet in terms of new legal restrictions, so much so that activists have come to call the Duma, the Russian legislature, the crazy printer, because new laws since 2012 are being adopted for different types of content after content after content. You also have a crackdown on the ICT sector. Pavel Durov, the former head of VKontakte, Russia's Facebook, fleeing the country a year ago, saying that he'd been forced to sell his shares because he wouldn't take down sites related to the conflict in Ukraine. And crackdown on independent media, especially online media, which had once been seen, the internet had once been seen in Russia as the last place for free media. And this increasing rhetoric of information warfare, of information security, especially relating to the conflict in Ukraine. So what does this say? What do developments like this in an important exemplar case like Russia, or these global trends we see, say about the future prospects for an interconnected internet, which continues to be a global network of networks, a global common good? A few things to wrap up. First, we've seen that there are these diverging policy trends, and it's unclear whether those will continue in the same way. These things keep changing. Events like the Arab Spring, events like the Snowden revelations have a systematic exogenous shock effect on the policy choices of states. But it's at least troubling to see this kind of patchwork quilt effect of states pulling away and taking more very different approaches, maybe in many cases moving towards developing their internet almost like a national intranet in more and more sophisticated ways. So there's this threat of fragmentation. At the same time, you have the technology changing and countries becoming more technologically sophisticated about what sorts of approaches they can take. You have real cases of authoritarian learning within regions and across states of similar regime type. States learning from observing the policies being adopted by other states and the technologies. There's an issue of availability. States seeing a technological approach they hadn't known before and using it and applying it at home. What can be done about this? What other things might be intervening factors that could affect this future? It seems that this discussion of norms that we're starting here today is very important. And it will continue to play an important role because many of the states which haven't yet taken as severe an approach towards internet restriction are also states which will face dueling pressures. Pressures to develop their economy. Many of them are developing countries. Many of them are countries which, at least in name, base their legitimacy on being democratic, having democratic institutions. This makes them vulnerable to economic performance legitimacy if they go too hard against their ICT sector. It also makes them vulnerable to these sorts of protest movements that leverage the technologies. But they also are very keenly aware of the risks of not abiding by international norms in ways that would badly affect their reputation at home and abroad. And that's why this discussion of norms is so important. Thanks so much.
Hello. Ichiro Fujisaki from Tokyo. Thank you very much for this occasion. Japan has been attacked so much, the government and the enterprises in the last few years, so we are stepping up our defense. And in 2013, new strategy, last year, basic law, and this year, from January, Cabinet has established a National Center for Cyber. And in May this year, we have agreed with the United States new defense guideline, and in that, cyber and security is a very important field of cooperation between Japan and the United States. Now we are facing new challenges now. One, from January 2016, we are introducing something like your social security number. And some people are concerned that the personal information would leak out, because only this May our pension service was attacked and 1.25 million names were leaked out and numbers. So there are this is a big challenge we have to face. Now, the next challenge is 2020. We have Olympic Games. We are hosting it. And we know what happened to London. There was huge number of attacks during that Olympic Games, so we have to really create a system, because we have all those airlines and bullet trains and everything there, so we have to really create good defense for that. This is the where we are. Now, we are very interested in the discussion between two presidents, President Obama and President Xi, and maritime security and cyber. But personally, I don't have too much euphorism, optimism, because I think 2 years ago, U.S. and China established a working group, but on cybersecurity, and I don't think there has been any tangible results, because that's very clear. It's very different from any arms reduction discussion like which existed between Soviet Union and United States, because both sides are saying that they are the victims, and no one is saying that they are on the offensive side. So everyone is saying that we have to be very careful. We are the victims, and the second point is that both sides have to conceal their capability as well. So how much discussion they can really have is very limited in that sense, I think. Now, code of ethics, I think it's a very good trial. It's a very interesting idea, but we have to be very careful going step by step, because, as I said, everyone is saying that they are not the offender, so that's the very difficult part about this code of ethics as well. There's an old saying in China. The word contradiction in Chinese is shield and spear, because one merchant came to town and said, "This shield is the strongest shield in the world. No spear can go through." And he was, on the other hand, selling a spear, and he said, "This spear can go through any shield." So people asked him, "What if you use the shield and try to go through that spear?" And he, of course, he can answer. So the Chinese word contradiction is this shield and spear. And we have been doing this shield and spear all the way in our arms race. And I think this is an eternal competition. And I think this is going to happen in cyber area as well, because once we started to use internet, web, big data, we cannot go without it. It's like electricity. Once we started to use it, even if there's any problem, we have to be using it, defending. So, and there are always someone who's going to exploit that situation and try to attack us. So we have to make better shield, better, and that eternal competition is going on, starting. So very frankly, this trial is very important, ethics, and I think we should involve ourselves in that, but at the same time, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that cyber peace will not really be there, and we have to be dependent on those code of ethics amongst like-minded people, like-minded countries, but that is not universal. I'm sorry, I think we should put this discussion in a realistic terms, so I made a little, maybe, challenging position to some of you, but thank you very much.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much. All right, now we're going to turn to what is really the focus of our meeting today, and I hope lots of good work ahead, and that is whether or not we can create a code of conduct which will increasingly be accepted by people and by nations, so that we can begin to make some sense out of this and achieve some of the goals that we've heard from our speakers, and an information system that has integrity to it. I'm going to ask Tuan and Tom Passett to join us and to talk first about that idea, and then we're going to turn to my friend Carlos Torres on the West Coast, Robin Sproul from ABC News, and Professor Bob Desmond. Tom, Tuan, you're on.
On 23rd of September at Governor Michael Dukakis' house at Michael Dukakis Leadership Lecture, distinguished lecture for Michael Dukakis Leadership Fellows this year. We officially announced the ethics code of conduct for cyber peace and security. And we are together and were led by Governor Michael Dukakis, I, Tom, Professor John Welch, and Professor Carlos Torres from UCLA, together with the contribution from Michael Dukakis Leadership Fellows and our Young Leader Network for Peace and Security. We officially launched version 1.0 for the ethics code of conduct for cyber peace and security. So now, Professor Tom Peterson will present more detail about that.
Thank you, Tuan. So we have created an ethics code of conduct for cybersecurity, version 1.0, and the purpose of the code is to raise awareness of the cybersecurity issue. Now, ethics codes don't have a lot of teeth, but they're helpful in creating the norms that govern behavior, and sometimes ethics code can lead to accords and agreements. Now, there are other ethics codes in the area of cybersecurity that are out there. I think what distinguishes the one that we've created is its breadth. It covers all of the major actors in this space, how citizens should behave, how state and non-state actors should behave, how IT engineers should behave, how business firms ought to behave, and how educators and institutions should behave. Now, we posted it on the Boston Global Forum website as a draft code, and it was created by Tuan. The first draft was created by Tuan after consultation with a number of experts in this particular area. But we're developing it, and we're encouraging others to weigh in terms of what that code ought to say. And we intend to have version 2.0 in December, but again, we want to create that code with a lot of voices helping to make it a really strong code, and one that others can look to and emulate. Thank you.
Thanks for having me here. I'll just give you maybe a somewhat different perspective on this issue of cybersecurity from the point of view of a scientific enterprise. I'm from the McGovern Institute for Brain Research up here at MIT, where we do research that we believe will ultimately help people suffering from many forms of brain disorders. And the field of neuroscience, like almost every area of certainly in the life sciences, is undergoing revolutionary change now. There's a tremendous information coming in from human genetic studies, from studies based on recordings of large quantities of neural recordings, on brain imaging data, and so on. And increasingly, these studies are not just one scientist working in his own lab, he or she's own lab, by themselves in some isolated little thing, but are increasingly depending on collaborations across different labs, different universities, and increasingly across different countries. we have many, many projects undergoing right now, crossing international borders with very active collaborators in Europe, China, and so on. And so all of these collaborations and the big data efforts and so on are all vulnerable to either malicious attacks or blocks that are set up across international boundaries in particular. Our colleagues in China increasingly complain that they don't have access to our information, they don't have access sometimes to scientific journals, emails don't always get through, and it's every year the situation has gotten worse, and every year you hear about more vulnerabilities on the data storage systems we have for critical data, some of which contain sensitive patient information and so on. So I'm a consumer of information technology, and all I can say is that any effort to try to improve the security of these systems is going to have a hugely positive impact on the scientific enterprise, and so I would just encourage everyone along those lines. Thank you.
Robin Sproul, are you up there?
Yeah, I am.
Great. Well,
Thank you. Thank you, Governor, Tuan, Tom, and all of you for allowing me to come here and talk today. And I want to pay a special tribute to Ambassador Fujisaki, who was one of the finest ambassadors and diplomats in Washington in his time. He had terrific outreach to the Washington community, was involved in many issues. It's no surprise to me that he's involved in this, and I'm thrilled to see his voice and to hear him again talking about such an important issue. He also threw the best dinner parties ever to happen in Washington, bringing in some of the wonderful chefs from Japan, and it was a thrill to have him in Washington, and we miss him. So thank you, Ambassador Fujisaki. Now, I applaud the efforts of the Boston Global Forum to develop these standards in the Code of Conduct for Cyber Peace and Security. I'm speaking today as a journalist of 40 years with ABC News, and someone who has been sort of in the forefront of trying to struggle with issues of coverage and the way forward in this digital age. I was the Washington Bureau Chief for 20 years, and I stepped aside last year to work on special political projects and our external relations in Washington. But having taken a bureau from typewriters to Twitter and having dealt with the issues of journalism, I can agree that you can't, the future is what's important here. We don't learn the lessons. We have a lot of lessons from the past and from history, but we are constantly surprised and trying to anticipate what this future in the digital age brings and what are the right norms, the right standards, the right ethics as we move forward. And the code does properly address recommended behaviors for citizens, the policymakers, businesses, engineers, and the like. But as a sort of parallel consideration and something that's very important, it's a slice of this. It would be timely to also look at how some of these issues affect journalism, and maybe it's time to establish some basic guidelines for journalists internationally, for those struggling still to speak truth to power around the world. Many nations don't share our own press freedom, but even U.S. press freedoms have faced challenges in the digital world, and these challenges continue to need addressing. Setting standards in this country, I think, can again show us as leaders to the rest of the world in press freedom and help maybe show other nations the way forward. Many journalism organizations are looking already at these issues. The protection of confidential sources in a digital age has been a big struggle in the U.S., and cases like James Risen and many other cases of reporters who face jail time bring the issue to the forefront, but it's also something that has some specific issues that are raised by the digital age. And after it was revealed, I think it was 2 years ago, that the government had secretly collected phone records of reporters and editors of the Associated Press, we had a series of high-level meetings between the Attorney General and journalists, some high-level, long-time journalists. These meetings are still going on. We are trying to rewrite decades-old standards and policies, first established in an analog era, and that process continues today, but it's incredibly challenging. Edward Snowden's leaked documents about government surveillance, the hacked Sony emails that were released to the media, and other stories like that continue to highlight the need to establish what are our norms. The best reporters are only as good as their sources, and if people fear talking to or communicating digitally with a reporter in this digital age, then the information will stop flowing freely. It's a different issue than overall internet information and freedom, but it is an important issue to journalism. And if you believe, as I do, that a free press is part of the firm foundation of good government, then you must commit to protecting journalists as they do their jobs. People working within our own political and corporate power structure must feel confident that if they blow the whistle on corruption, they will not be victimized. The biggest stories in our memories, stories like Watergate, Vietnam, Pentagon Papers, NSA spying, and the like, stories that arguably changed the course of history in our country, all started with sources from within the power structure who felt their voices would not be heard without the help of journalists. And here are some threats to that process and a free press in the digital age. There's increased surveillance and monitoring of communications by governments and corporations. Emails and internet messages are easily accessed. In the legitimate and very necessary fight against global terrorism, there's data collection and retention, including emails and phone calls by the government. We need protection from using this capability against journalists doing their jobs. Our devices that we all carry around, and that, you know, I have to panic if I even leave it at home for 1 day or 1 hour. They are so easy to use now and so helpful to us in our jobs, even allow us to broadcast from our phones. But we can be tracked by hackers, corporations, governments. They can find out where we are at any given time, who we're talking to. And that's something that many journalists have become very complacent in using those devices. There's less public respect for privacy than ever before, and there are fragile legal safeguards because of outdated laws. UNESCO and many other journalist organizations are looking at making recommendations on these issues, and maybe it's something to also consider. Already there are studies that show reporters are more reluctant now than they used to be to undertake very big level news investigations that may lead to battles over source protection. Also in the digital age, many news organizations are facing severe budget crises, and these battles are very expensive. Journalists really need to take it upon ourselves to be better trained in digital security, handling confidential information in digitally secure ways. The efficiency, again, of using our devices makes us too complacent about these security issues, and best practices need to be established. Also, the public needs to take this issue more seriously, and our own sources. I mean, everyone needs to be more aware of cybersecurity. The government should adopt, update, and strengthen source protection and shield laws, and these laws need to be more realistic in a digital age. Active journalism should be shielded from targeted surveillance, data retention, and other efforts aimed at revealing confidential sources. And we all think that exceptions to this rule, and there have to be exceptions, I understand, should be very narrow so that the norm is source protection. Journalists need to work together to develop digital age standards on privacy and what can and should be made public when we are handed hacked and then leaked materials. And in the case of the Sony emails, it was a very interesting ethics and standards situation for us, because out come these emails with and information published anonymously on sites. Shocking information, startling information, definitely news by anyone's judgment of what is news. But Sony demanded that media outlets stop reporting on those leaked emails and stolen documents. They were hacked. They called the material stolen information, and they threatened legal action. And by the time we were able to sort of process, yes, actually, very damaging and very embarrassing material have been made public. These celebrity email addresses, racist remarks by executives, gossip, and some business news, all obtained by cyber attack. That caused us at ABC to thoroughly review. I mean, we did not, eventually, we did not, we characterized some of the material that was out there, but we did not publish them. We do not set the standard, anybody else's standards but our own, and obviously that material got out there. Aaron Sorkin, in an op-ed on this situation, said that reporters writing about that kind of leaked document, and those leaked documents specifically, were, quote, morally treasonous and spectacularly dishonest. They were trafficking in stolen goods. These are just some of the issues that are raised by the digital age and by cybersecurity. And they need public scrutiny and common interest best practice established. I think that there's some must-dos for journalists. We must educate ourselves about the critical issues involved in cybersecurity. There are very few journalists, it's not who are real experts and who have big audiences. We need to do our part to bring these issues more to the public. That is a must-do for journalists. We must actually prepare ourselves to be able to effectively communicate to the public. When incidents occur, we need digital literacy and situational awareness that I would say most mainstream journalists still are lacking. We need to technically prepare better. We prepare internally our own email communications, but I don't think we're technically prepared for a lot of different scenarios and how we communicate to the public when the country is under attack, depending whether it's financial institutions, military issues or whatever. We need to run those tabletop exercises for ourselves, and we must work toward establishing the standards that protect the privacy and civil liberties of others as well as those of journalists. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Robin. Full disclosure, our oldest granddaughter is now a young producer for ABC.
She's still there.
And I hope she's doing a good job.
Doing a great job.
So give Alexandra Jane Dukakis my very best when we get back to DC. And now we're going to UCLA, I believe, or is to Japan. We're not going to bring Dr. Torres in. Okay. I think we have Dr. Ota with us. So let's begin.
Hello, this is Vice Admiral Quincy. I director of the Well, I think the Chinese strategy is based on Sun Tzu, Art of War. And in chapter 6 of Sun Tzu, Art of War, they say that good warfare is attack to the enemy's weakness. And enemy weakness means the Western military system, including Japan and the United States, the most vulnerable is they rely on information systems such as computer and satellite. So in order to make a hard attack, China created the satellite attack, and then in order to make a soft attack, they will create a cyber attack. So that is my understanding. So the China intentionally doing that cyber attack. So the ethics of code of conduct doesn't work for that. They intentionally do that. And for example, the China and Asian country created the code of conduct in the South China Sea in 2002, but it doesn't work. The China violated that. And also, Xi Jinping made a statement in Seattle a couple of days ago. China is also a victim of hacking. That is another sentence of the Sun Tzu warfare. In the first chapter, all warfare based on deception. And then the cyber warfare is also affecting toward the Japanese defense policy. So far, Japan has conducting exclusive defense policy, that in a cyber warfare, offender is always take advantage, and the defender will be loose. So we have to revise our defense exclusive policy in the defense arena. That's all. Thank you very much.
We bring back the choice in now.
is about Professor Acoustic Prevention.
Fantastic choice.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Carlos Alberto Torres. I'm a distinguished professor of education and UNESCO chair in global learning and global citizenship education. And I am absolutely delighted to be able to be with you today to talk about the big topics of our conference, the Ethics Code of Conduct for Cyber Peace and Security Conference. My perception is that life has become intense. The interactions have become multiple. Sometimes we feel we don't really have control of our own lives. The intensity of communications, while making us more aware of things, able to work closer to people who are miles and miles away from us, also affect some of the basic principles that academia was built on. One of them is the ability to pause, to reflect, to be able to comment about an issue without no urgency. Another, that we have a quest for the truth. This quest for the truth, undeniable, is now being challenged by some of the elements that we see through the question of peace and cybersecurity. Let me start with a statement from Mark Twain, one of my favorite writers in his book, The Letters of the Earth. He said, "Our civilization is a civilization who has destroyed the simplicity and repose of life, replaced its contentment, its poetry, its soft romance dreams with visions, with the money fever, sordid ideas, vulgar ambitions, and the sleep which does not refresh." I think this indictment of Mark Twain of our current civilizations is still very much valid. And I think the intensity that this digital culture has brought to our lives have created another layer of complexity in this civilization crisis. Let me say that, without going into great detail, that I believe that this conference is very important because this is the first time at least I can participate in a discussion about cybersecurity. I must confess, it's not a topic I've been studying, it's not what I know, it's not my own research. But this is a topic that all of us, whether we are experts or not, we should be concerned. My goal will be to offer you one proposition and then to define the terms of this proposition. And finally, briefly ask one or two questions. The first proposition is that the question of peace and security, connected with cybernetics and the context of internet and communications, is a question that pertains to one of the most important challenges of today: how to build a global citizen, and how to build global citizenship education. Those two are the great topics of my own research and many of my own colleagues and my students, and are the key behind the UNESCO chair that I have been so honored to receive. And we are beginning to implement research worldwide. Now, what is global citizenship? Let me offer you the following premise. The only way we can talk about global citizenship if we talk about global commons. This interconnection us so much, given the question of peace and cybersecurity, is also predicated on the premise that we share things in common, the global commons. This is not the time to start a philosophical, political, and legal discussion of what the global commons are. But when one thinks of global citizenship as a for the work of the UN in the next 10 to 15 years, one has to agree that these three principles need to be sustained. The first one is that our planet is our only home, that we have to create citizenship, sustainable development, education. The second is predicated with the notion that to have a global common, we have to protect the global peace. Global peace is an intangible cultural good of humanity, immaterial values. Global peace is a treasure of humanity. Just because of this second principle, we need to make sure that the digital culture we are enjoying and used for so many different things, from communication to law, from commerce to crime, we should be able to focus on how to protect peace as a global common. And finally, I think that having studied carefully the way in which the American Constitution was created, I have concluded that a third global common is based on the need to find ways that people who are all equal manage to live together democratically in an ever-growing diverse world, seeking to fulfill their individual and cultural interests and achieving their inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is exactly what life is all about. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are connecting ourselves to this debate because to achieve cybersecurity and peace, we need to protect these three principles of our global commons. So let me end with one or two questions. One of my great concerns as an avid user of the internet, as somebody who publishes extensively, who collect data everywhere, who connect with hundreds of people basically on a weekly basis. What are the ethics of our interactions? How can I show to anybody who asks me that the information I collect from the internet is truthful? How can I define that this information was obtained through legal means? How can I be sure that the interaction we are having with people through teleconferencing or Skype and other means is not being registered, is not being collected by other people for ulterior purposes? This is a great dilemma in my mind. The internet, this extraordinary way in which communications have been improving at an extraordinarily fast pace, have altered the connection between the private and the public. What was always private now could become public very quickly. And this connection of private and public, it is an important connection. There is an intimacy we have to protect, but at the same time, there's a truth that we have to predicate. What are the limits and possibility of predicating the truth and protecting the intimacy? That is a question for all of us. It's a question for our children, for our grandchildren. There's a second element that concerns me as a scholar. A scholarship is conducted on important premises, but it's conducted by people. People, all of us, you, me, everybody else, has an ego. There is a battle of egos in academia, we all know that. In this battle of egos, now the internet is a very powerful tool. This powerful tool is that through the internet, we make and we destroy reputations. to the internet, to the digital culture, we claim things that will be very difficult to prove in a court of law. So here is my challenge to you. That's my challenge to me. That the challenge in creating a model of truthfulness and cyber security for peace. Is there a way we can protect the integrity of people, preventing that others who don't like what they do, they don't like what they think, they don't like what they say, don't attack them? Not on grounds of the truthfulness of the statements, the strength of the methodology, the quality of the data and the theory, but simply trying to undermine the position of an individual human being. I finish with this statement, which for me is absolutely decisive. In the last election of the US, one of the advisors, one of the candidates said, I'm not going to let the fact checkers to run this campaign. I think this is an indication of how difficult it is to have ethics in the internet. I appreciate very much your time. I send you my warmest regards, and I hope the deliberations will be very productive. Thank you very much.
Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you in the winter quarter. Difficult though it is, Kitty and I leave New England the day after Christmas, and I teach during the winter quarter at UCLA. It's a terrible burden, but somebody's got to do it. And this will be our 21st, and it's been a real pleasure to get to know Dr. Torres out there, so we're looking forward to that. Okay, we're going to go now to Ambassador Bindenagel, who has joined us in a number of these conferences. He's at University in Bonn, Germany, and then we'll have one additional discussion. Then I'm going to turn it back to Twan and Tom Patterson. We're going to have an announcement about our next meeting in December, and then we're going to invite our scholars to do a little discussing of all of this with us. So, Ambassador, you with us? There he is. Okay.
No. I think it's not that. It's not taking place. No, I don't think it's not the problem. It's not that. Yeah.
So we'll now go to Mr. Nagayama, back to Tokyo.
I'm so after that.
Shall we bring you back? Okay. Tom, want to join us? It's a great medium, but every once in a while.
Maybe Ambassador JD Bindenagel have some thing to do. So he cannot. He has appeared here. Okay. So we continue with the next part. Also on 23 of September at Governor Michael Dukakis house at Michael Dukakis leadership lecture, we announced new initiatives. And it is a Global Cybersecurity Day. Every year we organize Global Cybersecurity Day on December 12 at 12 p.m. We connect with some university first, Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, UCLA, and Bonn University, Meiji University, and some university in Vietnam, and some cities in the world. We join, we promote cybersecurity with a lot of events and ideas, new initiatives. So Professor Tom Peterson will talk more and detail about that. And the second, that is we launch a global cybersecurity journalist network, with joy and founded by from board of director Boston Global Forum includes Governor Michael Dukakis. I and Tom, we are also do very much in media, and Professor Tom Fieler, Dean of College Communication, Boston University. He also former executive editor of Miami Herald and Pulitzer Prize journalist. So together with Professor John Wells also, and editorial board of Boston Global Forum, we will build and develop global cybersecurity journalist network to promote and support for cybersecurity, also for the ethical code of conduct for peace and security, and also the Global Cybersecurity Day, December 12th. Now, Professor Tom, I can talk about that.
So, as Tuan mentioned, we're going to mark December 12th as Global Cybersecurity Day, and like so much of what the Boston Global Forum does, this idea comes from the fertile mind of Tuan, and sometimes I feel like I'm in the business of being Tuan's press secretary of some of these conferences to talk a little bit more about his ideas. But I think it's an extraordinary idea. It has several purposes. I think one is to promote the ethics code that we talked about earlier. We'll be announcing version 2.0 on that day. Also to set aside a day where the Boston Global Forum can again raise this issue and to pursue it, think it through, and get others to join with us. And then I think in the long run to try to inspire others to set aside a day each year to promote cybersecurity. I'm old enough to remember when Senator Gaylord Nelson of Wisconsin came up with the idea of Earth Day. And he spent several years trying to get people interested in the idea. And it was a tough sell. But there was a point at which it became an international phenomenon. That Earth Day now is celebrated by tens of thousands of organizations and institutions on a given day of the year. An inspiring idea from a single individual. And I would hope that we can try to do the same thing with Global Cybersecurity Day. Earth Day speaks to the visible environment. Cybersecurity speaks to a less visible but no less important area of our lives. Thank you.
Back.
Ambassador Peter hear us and very clear he wants to talk, but I don't know why.
I think let me.
Peter, please stop. JD.
At the channel, he didn't join.
He hear us. He can hear and when he appear already, and he hear us.
Yes, all people we have.
Speaker, maybe.
All right.
problem about technical. So
Yes. We're not connecting out there. Okay, we've got our fellows here for the first time. They're a remarkable group of very bright and able and involved young people. So we've got a few minutes now to have some discussion amongst our fellows on this, ideas, suggestions, recommendations, whatever. Should we start with you? Come on.
Good morning. I just want to say it's an honor to be a part of the Boston Global Forum here, and I want to extend a special thanks to Governor Dukakis, Tuan, Professor Patterson, and all of the faculty and staff here at Harvard, MIT, and Boston University, and the other universities that are part of the Boston Global Forum to make it a huge success. Today, we're talking about a very serious global problem that affects everybody in this room. And it requires global thinkers and thought leaders around the world to come together to address. A couple of statistics that I have, I'm echoing a number of sentiments and comments that were made earlier. Cybercrime costs the global economy an estimated $400 billion a year in loss. The digital revolution is transforming our society, and the Internet of Things is about to redefine it. Nearly 73% of businesses rank cybersecurity as their #1 risk moving into the new fiscal year. Almost 70% of cyber attacks are financially motivated, which means that the hackers are out to steal your data for profit. The biggest mover amongst these, at 14%, moving up from 7%, is cyber espionage. Sophisticated hackers are consistently finding ways inside networks looking to destroy, disrupt, and steal information for financial gain. State-sponsored cyber attacks are reaching an all-time high, penetrating high-value government agencies and critical infrastructure institutions vital to our economy and growth. The cost of getting it wrong is too high. Some may argue the fact, but we are in the middle of a cyber arms race, a cyber Cold War that is reaching epic proportions. Being a cybersecurity consultant today, I'm on the front lines of these types of cyber attacks, and I've seen these attacks, and they are very sophisticated and they are very lethal. So, how can we address this problem? How can we send the message and bring key stakeholders around the world to define an ethical code of conduct, rules of engagement, and create a form of cyber peace among nation states? Through the Boston Global Forum, I'm proposing an action plan to build a cyber threat index that will begin to collect known cyber threats and attacks from around the world and create a summary report and threat index to demonstrate the veracity and global impact of these threats. This is something that I think is very key, that we need to bridge the gap between technology and technologists and legislation and the leaders that make policy. One of the key benefits of this index will be to compile the data and suggest policy for the development of an ethical code of conduct, which can be taken to legislators around the world to help define it. Cybersecurity education and awareness serves as a major weapon in understanding the current cyber threat landscape. I want to read a short excerpt from China's president while visiting the United States on the West Coast at Microsoft this week. China is a staunch defender of cybersecurity. It is also a victim of hacking. Yeah. The Chinese government will not, in whatever form, engage in commercial thefts or encourage or support such attempts by anyone. Both commercial cyber theft and hacking against government networks are crimes that must be punished in accordance with law and relevant international treaties. The international community should, on a basis of mutual respect and mutual trust work together to build a peaceful, secure, open, and cooperative cyberspace. China is ready to set up a high-level joint dialogue mechanism with the United States on fighting cyber crimes. Now, some may speculate that excerpt, that soundbite, and it may be an idealistic comment. And I share some of the sentiments from our colleagues from Japan as far as how serious and how true they are regarding those statements. But if what the Chinese president has said to be true is true, then I believe we've taken a giant step forward in mutually identifying a problem that can be solved through open communication and mutual respect for others' technical prowess, values, and an economic way of life. Setting an example between the United States and China on this critical initiative would hopefully bring other countries to come to the table with the same expectations in creating an ethical code of conduct for cyber peace and security around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Technical problem with the video. I cannot open it. I think we should.
Can't do it?
No.
No, we are camera.
Camera?
Bill. Yes, yes. So you
And then,
Thanks for having me. My name is Bill Ottman. I'm the founder of Minds.com, which is a free, open source, and encrypted social networking platform that rewards users with digital currency, and it's powered through voting. So we're actually going to be using some of our tools to help Boston Global Forum pick some of the choices for Global Cybersecurity Day. And really what we've created is a template and a model for businesses, governments, and individuals to use for their websites to maintain security. So a lot of people don't even really understand that free and open source software, encryption, security, and access to information are problems that they even have. Sort of this, we use these devices, you know, pretty much everyone has a website, but no one's really thinking about encryption or whether or not their website is proprietary or open source. I'm going to explain a little bit about why that matters. So the difference between free and open source software and proprietary software has to do with access to information. So with free software, you're able to use, modify, distribute, and improve upon the code that's powering your application. With proprietary software, the blueprints essentially of your website or app are kept secret. The best metaphor that I've come up with to make it a little bit more digestible is with food. So what we're seeing in the global food landscape is this split between conventional food and organic food, and there's a big push to label food so that people understand what they're consuming. So the same applies for free and open source software. if you use a license with the application that is free and open source, then you're able to understand what that application is doing to you. And with free and open source software, it's more peer-reviewed. So the global community can inspect it, understand how it works, and make a judgment as a community as to whether or not it's worth using. So in terms of encryption, if you look at the top 100 websites in the world, actually only 3 are free and open source. Those are Wikipedia, Reddit, and WordPress. Otherwise, it's all proprietary, and actually of the top 100 sites, almost none are encrypted fully. So, you know, we understand with the surveillance situation that emails, messages, it's all being surveilled in bulk. Now, surveillance is obviously necessary in some senses, but we don't really have a system that is intelligent enough to selectively choose through warrants which is actually necessary to surveil. So some recommendations for encryption. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has started a campaign called HTTPS Everywhere. A lot of people don't know what HTTPS is. When you go to a website, sometimes you'll see HTTP, sometimes you'll see HTTPS. If you don't have HTTPS, you're much more vulnerable to hacking. So HTTPS is super necessary. Recently, both the UN and MIT have come out with reports stating that encryption is crucial to everybody's security. So this question of whether we should be compromising our encryption in order to be more secure, you know, based on the reports of the UN and MIT, those are flawed ideas. Basically, encryption makes everyone safer, whether it's governments, individuals, or corporations. There's a great chilling effect that happens with freedom of speech when people can't trust that or know whether they're being surveilled or not. So when we make encryption universal, people are much more liberated to exercise their freedom of speech. So there's a little bit of a paradox between transparency and security, but actually they're very synergistic. So when you share the code, the global community is able to inspect it and make it more secure. There's sort of a misperception that if you keep things secret, you'll be more secure, but actually you earn all sorts of respect worldwide when you share information. So just a few solutions. Making it easy to be secure is super important. A lot of people don't care enough to learn about how to encrypt themselves. So that's a lot of what we're doing with Minds, is making it feel like any other social network, but you know that your data is being encrypted, kept safe, and you know that everything you type isn't being logged. And when you send a message, it feels just like any other easy application, but it's encrypted. Also, standards for data sharing. I mean, in the cloud, we sort of use the cloud and don't pay much attention to what that actually means. So when software is free and open source, that means that you have the ability to run it on your own server. Now, not everybody's going to do that, but just the fact that you have the ability to do it is a big step in the right direction. A lot of governments are switching to GNU Linux, which is the free operating system that no one really knows about, that powers about 70% of the world's financial infrastructure. So governments switching to Linux and free and open source software enables, and one conversation that Jeremy and I were having is sort of automating systems so that warrants can be requested much faster, so that if someone is shown to be a threat, then they're not just going to surveil everyone, but we can build a system that makes it faster to achieve those warrants rather than just forcing everyone to be surveilled. And yeah, it's just it's a tough problem. It's very complicated, it's technical, and we need to educate the policymakers. But now we're building up a pretty serious supply of reports that make it clear that encryption is important, that free and open source software is important. So if we can have the policymakers understand this, they're most likely not even going to fully understand it, but there comes a point where they're going to have to just take the word of the experts and adopt these policies.
Governor, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Roya Mahbub and I am an entrepreneur from Afghanistan. This week we had the chance to meet with extraordinary people and I personally have learned a lot. The topics that we discussed are very central to my vision and my work. My vision is that we can live in a peaceful world, that women in Afghanistan and other countries where their rights are restricted and their daily life is limited can freely express themselves and live in peace. Unfortunately, this is not the case yet. In my work, I focus on modern technologies because I believe that technology can bring social change that can lead to the social development. In Afghanistan, I experienced how after the fall of the Taliban, the technology overflowed the country. Mobile phones are common in the country, and social media and Facebook or YouTube, for example, become very popular in the larger city. But the use of this technology and social media, information is generated and distributed through our friends and networks. And our data is given to the third parties with the consequence that we have to think what data we want to share with them. I really quote, what happens to our data happens to ourselves. Who control our data control our lives. Not only do we leave the threats in the internet when we book a flight or we buy online some things, we also leave the threats through images and posts. In Afghanistan, I could also experience on a daily basis how digital content is used to create the stories about me or about any other successful woman, which was not always true. Such information can be threat, endanger, and safety, and make my work to advocate for education and women's rights very difficult. It can be even more harmful in particular for someone who has maybe less aware about the implication and impact of the social media than I am. Realizing the implication and how sensitive digital information is, I appreciated the effort of Boston Global Forum to implement the data code of the Contact for Peace and Security. And I want to contribute to the implemented data code that support protected information network, but at the same time enables human rights, freedom, and opportunity at the home and abroad. With my foundation, Digital Citizen Fund, we work on the issue as digital literacy, which for me include also digital responsibility and digital awareness about privacy and security issues. The goal of my foundation is to create a digital citizen that they are capable and confident in their voice, to empower women and children in developing countries to establish sustainable economic livelihood through technology, to encourage personal global connectivity, to inspire and raise cultural awareness. Up to today, I have established 13 technology centers that connected over 55,000 of female students to internet in Afghanistan and Mexico. Cybersecurity and peace need to be ensured on multiple levels. It affects home users, it affects small businesses, it affects larger enterprises, it affects government and as well global institution. It is local and as well as global issue. My expertise in the area of the education, and I believe that education from the early age in issue around digital responsibility and digital awareness are the first step to have the cyber peace and security. Therefore, I propose my action plan to train 5,000 of female students that and youths over a year and a half in the skills of digital literacy and within the rise awareness about the personal cybersecurity. My commitment to the Boston Global Forum is one to provide face-to-face training about digital literacy for the children in Afghanistan and Mexico. I have learned from the Governor Michael Dukakis that in enforcing changes, face-to-face interaction are very important. But I also have have a longer vision, a vision that such training can be available worldwide. Therefore, I will record it and to make the training material available in the form of the film presentation and documents. This will be online available and accessible in variety of languages. To start with that, I will begin with the Farsi, Spanish, and Vietnamese, for example. To facilitate and distribute such training, my platform EDD will be very beneficial. Right now, I'm working on EDD, Educate Yourself. It's a platform for business and schools, where the student can get practical training and apply the skills that make them employable by companies. My mission is to bridge the gap between the school-based education and job markets. The platform will act as a hub that allows for the schools, companies, job seeker, and learner all to be together through the ADD educational platform. In order to implement a digital literacy training and active implementation of data code, I see great potential to utilize my platform. I designed the following stage to implement and maintain the data code of the contact for peace and security. The first step to raise awareness about the issue of digital privacy and security. It's important for the student and user to understand how they give their data and how their data is used. The student should know that and aware that who they give their data and who is the company and what they do, how we know about them. These different aspects help to figure out where we can trust the tools and services. But I also want that the users reflected on the and curriculum for the students and users to enhance their skills. The next step is to provide the students practical tools and applications that they can help them to control over their data. This means programs that protected our computers and our sensitive files. And also, I wanted to create a toolkit for the students that offer possible explanation and how and why we should use data code, and as well as solution for how and why this is happening and how to prevent it to not happening. The last step is to improve and maintain data code. Therefore, I propose quarterly survey development, online measurability, and selective training adopted to our outcome survey. It's important to reflect and adopt the measurement continuously. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.
One at Boston Global. Good morning, everyone, at Boston Global Forum. Thank you for having me via satellite this morning, sharing my personal experiences on today's topic, which is the Ethics Code of Conduct for Cyber Peace and Security. Prior to giving my few bullet points about this topic, I would like to extend my warmest greetings to Governor Dukakis for having me as a member of your Young Leaders Network. And greetings to everyone, Professor Patterson, Professor Quelch, Professor Desmone, Dr. Torres, and Mr. Tuan Nguyen. It is a great pleasure to meet everyone and an honor to be a part of this morning's conference. As a former founder and CEO of 2 investment brokerage firms, and now the founder and CEO of the first of its kind social networking platform, I believe not only cybersecurity is an important topic to bring awareness globally, but it is imperative. Because what we don't know can't really hurt us. There are 3 main bullet points that I would like to point out when it comes to social media and cybersecurity. Point number 1, the rise and evolution of social media has brought a revolutionary change to the way we use the internet, both personally and professionally, as are considered as a part of life. When using personal information and data such as home address, credit, or debit card information. On our squeaky social media networking platforms, we are currently working with PayPal, where a user only needs an email address or a payment to buy certain items or making a donation. If there are strange charges, PayPal could easily send you an email alert of unusual transactions. Point number two, limit one's usage of multiple cards online. Personally, I would designate just one single card, preferably a credit card, because it doesn't link directly to your checking account or your saving account. And choose the card with the lowest limit for online purchases. If that card information gets stolen, we can quickly identify the threat by responding in real time, canceling that card, and avoid excessive fraudulent charges because we initially chose a lowest limit card to use. By doing so, it would give the banking institution sufficient time to do their research of the fraud and credit us back with those fraudulent transactions. I would also advise to sign up for real-time alerts, as most bank and credit card companies have this notification services that allow them to contact us in the event a purchase is deemed unusual. And of course, set out once a week, at least once a week, I would recommend to monitor all of your cards online. And it wouldn't hurt to cancel and request for a new card, say every 3 to 6 months. Point number three. This third point is more towards the code of conduct for online behavior, which personally I believe in the golden rule of treat others as how you want to be treated. It's the same golden rule if you were to treat that person in person or meeting that person online via the internet or through any of the social media sites. Another golden rule I truly believe in is, of course, speak positively. If you can't do that, then don't speak at all. In today's world of social media, there are a lot of haters. They are literally everywhere. Haters are not just strangers, but they can also be your co-workers, your classmates, and sometimes even your own friends. With social media, it's so easy for strangers to comment on a tweet, a Facebook post, or an online blog. They type out mean and hateful words by hiding behind their computer screen without any consequences whatsoever. It is a power trip to bring someone else down and taking away their confidence. In the recent second GOP debate, Carly Fiorina did a superb job responding to what Donald Trump said previously about her personally, her appearance, her face. Certainly, sometimes when we deal with haters, the golden rule is less is so much more. It is because of these golden rules that when I found Quincy's social networking platform, we wrote lines of code that whenever a user used a cursing word, Quincy's social network would automatically replace it with a deleted word. It is to my understanding, I believe, that Quincy is currently the only social media platform that has this feature embedded to our site for the pure purpose of promoting, encouraging constructive opinions to improve the lives of others without having to deal with haters with their insulting comments. I take the time to invite the board of directors, the board of thinkers, and the executive board of BGM. Thank you for having me as a part of your conference this morning.
I think we have Mr. Nakayama, State Minister of Foreign Affairs. Okay.
Hello?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hello. Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Governor Michael Lukakis will introduce about Vice Minister of Japan. Yes, please.
Japan State Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yokohama. Just trying to get him in. Here he is. Okay.
Oh, okay. Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Yasuhide Nakayama. I'm the State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan. And I'm really glad that I attend this meeting. And I'm sorry I'm a little bit late because my hometown, Osaka, now it's a Friday night. So actually, my supporters get gathering and drink and talk about the politics. We talk about Abenomics, live Abenomics from Osaka. So I late a little bit. I'm so sorry. And I apologize for that. And this morning, we discussed about the terror issue. And I was in Jordan when our Japanese 2 hostages captured by IS in January. I stayed at the 17 days in Amman, Jordan, and we negotiate with Islamic State, and then and also so we really focus on the terror issue, not the how do you say not the other person's issue, but for us, it's a really immediate issue. And one thing I'd like to tell you that in 2001, we had terrible terrorism from Osama bin Laden, and he attacked Twin Tower in New York in 2001, and even Japanese people included and get injured. And at that time, Osama bin Laden wasn't meet with high tech, but now the Islamic State terrorism meet with high tech, and we are afraid that the high tech and terrorism mixed up. This is ISIL. So there is no distance philosophy anymore. For example, Chinese PLA has a JL-2 missile, and if they launch a missile from the Western Pacific Ocean, 8,000 kilometers range, so which means already San Francisco, Anchorage, and also Honolulu inside of the range of missile. And so using internet and the terrorism is a new type of terror which Islamic State done to us. And then the war, 70 years, this is a 70th years anniversary of World War II. US and Japan fought against each other 17 years ago. But for example, if I showed you sound of the war 70 years ago, maybe like this. This is a 70 years ago war. But now, it's only one click. If you listen one click, the noise, already a terrorist attacked you. So in that sense, the war used to be nation versus nation. But the present war, new types of war, it's a nation versus a technician, or the one terrorist who got the cyber tech. This is the most different, or the gap between the 70 years ago war or present war. And I'm sure that this Islamic State example already starts the new types of war or secondary war. So we have to prepare our, the philosophy of war. We have to change in a new phase. And then I also think that in 1980s, 1990s, before the Berlin Wall or Russia collapse, I mean the Soviet Union collapse, there were Cold War exist. But now, after the Berlin Wall disappeared, everybody said there is no more Cold War. But I don't think so. in a cyberspace, Russia and China get together, and they really want to control the cyberspace. And how about the Western countries? We use internet technology to facilitate economy and facilitate the people communications. What's the difference between the new Cold War on cyberspace? I think the key word is a rule of law. In China or Russia, I think they have no rule of law because, okay, if there is some human rights professional lawyer, one day suddenly he or she said something, next day arrested, and because somebody said something about the human rights issue. I think it's the right thing if the lawyer makes some opinions, but there is no rule of law, so they captured suddenly. If some merchant gets lots of money, lots of profit, one day he become rich, next day the government captured or arrested the merchant. I think Western country has a rule of law, and then on behalf of no, the opposition, they have no rule of law. So we have to more negotiate and also more understanding each other. Both sides get together and talk about the cyber issue for 21st century. And finalize, in conclusion, I'd like to say we have to, so even something violence or not violence, military or not military, killing but not killing, including all the types, the terrorists always forced us to get their profit. And then the war, the concept has not changed, but the style of the war, it has been changed. I'm sorry, my English is not correct or is not enough, but I hope you will understand how do you say my stance of the anti-terror issue. And thank you very much for listening to my opinion. And also, I'd like to say thank you very much for Governor Michael Dukakis, the chairman of this conference, this forum, and also my friend Fujisaki-san, the Ambassador Fujisaki. He is now in in Tokyo, and also Mita-san and my colleagues from former Japanese Self-Defense Force. And thank you very much for everyone.
2 minutes before we wrap up, let's hear from our last two fellows. So, where are you guys?
Good morning, Governor Dukakis, Tom Patterson, Tuan, friends. Thank you very much for giving me this honor to be Dukakis Fellow and be part of Boston Global Forum. I am not from cyber world. I don't know anything about cybersecurity. I'm a journalist. I'm from India. And the area I come from, internet penetration is, guess how much? It's 0.2%. India, which is known as producing lots of internet brains, our internet reach is not more than 7%. So I represent a world which is not part of that world whose security we are talking about today. And as a journalist, what I have learned is when we exclude people, when we do not have communication with them, they communicate with sometimes wrong people, and that's the genesis of many wars. I live in central India, where we are in the middle of a big civil war, and what I find, there are many names to that war. That war is happening because lack of communication. Here I am in the land where many innovations took place in hundreds of years. Also Facebook, which you call social media, is actually anti-social media for our world, because the tiny percentage we call in Indian language creamy layer of our society, we are talking to each other and talking about our security. But in India we have caste system, upper caste and lower caste. Now we say there are three types of caste. One is internet caste, the cyber caste, and the second, which is very big in India, is mobile caste. The people who speak don't have the capability to write and connect. It's very important to connect these two worlds if we want to create a peaceful world. We need to, and I want to do that with help of Boston Global Forum in the year to come. That we have created Facebook. We also need to create Facebook for poor people, for people who don't have internet, those who don't have this machine called computer, which can convert our voice, our language, to digits 1 and 0. But if we keep them excluded, as the gentleman from Japan was saying, they will find one person who will do that click, and their anger will reach us. So I was reading about American independence movement, which took place quite a lot here. Like we have computer now, at printing press at that time. And that printing press many a time was controlled by authorities and censor board. Then the fighters, the freedom fighters, they became pamphleteers. They could not publish, but they printed pamphlets and distributed here and there, and that was a big part of journalism here, if you call it journalism or not, and that brought independence. We need to help these people. We need to help these guerrilla journalism, if you call it, and bring them to mainstream. If we do not talk to them, if we do not integrate with them, if we don't make platforms where a huge majority of humanity and their knowledge, so it's two worlds, digital world, cyber world, and people on the other side. I'll be very keen to work with all of you so that we also include them in our cyber world and make a beautiful future and more peaceful tomorrow. Thank you very, very much.
中山副大臣、お疲れ様でした。よかったです。
ありがとうございます。そうです。
Good morning.
僕の日本語が通じてるか。僕の英語が通じてるか。
And Professor Thomas Peterson and Professor John Quayle, it has been a privilege to be here in Boston the last few days to attend lectures by professors from Harvard faculty. And it is an honor for all of us here, the Young Leader Network under Michael Dukakis program, to have this privilege to be with all the great minds here I think today we have spoken all the important part with the experts of IT, all the people that understand very well with internet. Talking about internet, I'm thinking about way back when I was growing up after the late 70s, as we all get out of the dust of war in Vietnam. So we probably really understand the meaning of peace, the value of peace. So at the time, we didn't have any printing machine. I just thought about all my books, the music book that my father would copy by hands. And until now that we have all the technology to serve our life. So we all would like to have the technology to serve the goodness as we live in this period of time in a lifetime. It's not long. So we're trying to. That's the same amount of time we can either focus on good or bad. So it's important to have the leadership of all the great people, that have done lots for the community, like Governor Michael Dukakis. So when we have good leaders, we will focus our time and ability and potential and talent to serve back the community. So as a part of this program, I would like to, on the behalf of all the artists and musicians in Vietnam, in New York, in Monaco, the painter and artists all over the world, to call people to focus on the goodness that we could produce and give to the children and to all the people that in the less fortunate part of the world to have a better life. We can focus into having a life with lots of happiness and built to provide everybody with happiness and prosperity. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, I'm for part of this because Tuan, when you believe that I could be part of this, I think that maybe that is one of the things that I could contribute is the music. So I wrote 2 pieces of music. Today we'll play the piece called The Dance, that stands for happiness. And in December, I will dedicate the piece Prayer, December 12th, for our 2nd anniversary. So I hope you like it. Thank you very much.
Lovely way to end. Just terrific. Thank you. First, thank you all for being part of this, both those of you here in Cambridge and a lot of folks out there who've been participating with us and observing. Let me just say a couple of quick words and wrapping things up. First, my sense from listening to the discussion today is that nobody in this debate is blameless, including the United States of America. In fact, we may have had something to do with starting this. So I think this is a case where folks might just kind of put the conflict stuff aside and begin to start thinking seriously, as I hope we have, as to how you bring people together. Whatever you thought of the agreement between the United States and Iran, I think we can agree that without active international participation, and especially the participation of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, it would have never happened. And if we're going to begin to resolve and develop the kind of code of conduct we're talking about, this has got to be a genuine international effort. And I hope, at least to some extent, we've begun that effort here. So mark December the 12th on your calendars for Cybersecurity Day, Tom. We're going to be back, and we're going to be following up, and I hope making real progress over the next few months. Our special thanks to our fellows. Great to get a chance to spend time with you and to learn from you, and to all of you here and folks out there who have been part of this. Tuan, a special thanks to you for putting all of this together, and we'll see you in December. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.